Babes, I'm going on a date with my new boss, Harper said, her voice calm, almost too calm. She stood in front of the mirror, fixing her hair like she was preparing for a red carpet event. I stopped in my tracks, frozen in the doorway of our bedroom. My brain struggled to process her words. Was she joking? Did I mishear her? What nonsense is this? You're not going anywhere, I said firmly, the confusion quickly giving way to anger. She didn't turn around right away. Instead, she applied another layer of lipstick, her reflection smiling smugly back at her. Finally, she turned to face me, her eyes narrowing. Oh, come on, loser. It's not a big deal. My stomach twisted. Did she just call me a loser? What the hell is that supposed to mean? I snapped, my voice rising. It means, she said, dragging the words out like she was talking to a child, you're jealous. Admit it. You can't handle the fact that he's rich, successful, and, let's face it, much better looking than you. I clenched my fists. Jealous? Of some guy you barely know? Of your boss? She shrugged. It's not like that. It's just dinner, and maybe a little fun afterward. Her lips curled into a smirk, one that cut deeper than her words. By the way, I promised him a wild night. Her casual delivery, as if she were discussing weekend plans with a friend, made my blood boil. 16 years of marriage. 16 years of shared struggles, triumphs, and sacrifices. And now, she was throwing it all away like it was nothing. A wild night? Are you even hearing yourself right now? I stepped closer, my voice shaking. Harper, this isn't a joke. If you walk out that door, if you go through with this, there's no coming back. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed laugh, but a cold, mocking one. God, you're so dramatic. It's one night, James. Relax. Relax. I echoed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. You're talking about cheating on me, on our marriage, and you want me to relax? She sighed, exasperated, and picked up her purse. This is why I didn't tell you earlier. You overreact to everything. Honestly, it's suffocating. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. This wasn't overreaction. This was betrayal, plain and simple. I'm giving you one last chance, I said, stepping in front of her. Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built together. For what? Some thrill? Some fling? Her expression hardened. She pushed past me and walked toward the door. You don't get it, James. I've spent years feeling stuck, bored. Maybe this is exactly what I need. What we need. I barked, incredulous. This isn't about us, Harper. This is about you. Your selfishness. She cut me off with a wave of her hand. Save the lecture. I'm going. Don't wait up. The door opened, and I stood there, helpless, as she crossed the threshold. I called out one last time, desperation seeping into my voice. If you walk out that door, our 16 years of marriage are over. She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to see her smirk. Yeah, sure. Whatever, she said, and then she was gone. The door slammed shut, and the house fell into silence. I stood in the living room, staring at the door, half expecting her to come back. Maybe she'd realize how wrong she was. Maybe she'd remember the vows we made to each other. But deep down, I knew she wasn't coming back. Not that night. Maybe not ever. The sound of the clock ticking filled the empty space. I dropped onto the couch, my head in my hands. A whirlwind of emotions consumed me. Anger, disbelief, sadness. But the strongest one was something else entirely. Resolve? This wasn't just about her walking out. It was about the disrespect, the complete disregard for everything we'd built together. If she thought I was going to sit here and let her humiliate me, let her destroy our family, she was dead wrong. The silence in the house was unbearable. It wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive, like the weight of betrayal clinging to the walls. The dining table I sat at had seen countless family dinners, celebrations, and late-night conversations. Now, it felt like a stage where the facade of a happy family had finally crumbled. The wedding photo in front of me drew my eyes, though I didn't want to look at it. Harper's smile was radiant, genuine, or so I had thought. My own face in the picture looked younger, hopeful. I couldn't reconcile that version of us with what had happened. I picked up the photo frame and stared at it, my thumb running over the glass. A wave of anger surged through me, and before I could stop myself, I hurled it across the room. The glass shattered, the sound echoing loudly in the empty house. It was satisfying for a moment. Then, silence returned. Upstairs, Nina and Kyle were asleep, their soft breathing a reminder of my responsibilities. Whatever I did next, it wasn't just for me, it was for them. They deserved better than this chaos. I climbed the stairs quietly and peeked into their rooms. Nina was sprawled on her bed, one arm dangling off the side, her headphones still on. I gently removed them, placing them on her desk. She stirred but didn't wake. In the next room, Kyle was curled up with his favorite stuffed dinosaur. I tucked his blanket around him, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "I'll protect you," I whispered. "No matter what." I returned downstairs, my mind racing. Harper had made her choice. Now it was my turn. I couldn't let her walk all over me, not after what she'd done. I needed a plan. At dawn, I made the first call. "Hey, Gary," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's James. I need your help." Gary was a real estate agent I had worked with years ago. He was sharp, discreet, and most importantly, trusted. "James, good to hear from you." "What's up?" he asked, his tone curious. "I need to sell my house. Fast." Gary paused for a moment. "Fast? How fast are we talking?" "By the end of the week," I said. "I don't care about squeezing every penny out of it. Just get it sold." There was a longer pause this time. "That's a big move, James. Everything okay?" "It's personal," I said, cutting him off. "Can you do it or not?" "Of course," Gary replied. "Send me the details. I'll handle it." By the time we ended the call, I already felt the first thread of control returning. Next, I logged into our joint bank account. The numbers stared back at me. Savings we'd built over the years, emergency funds we'd set aside, all tied to memories of sacrifices and plans for the future. I transferred everything, every cent, into a private account Harper didn't know existed. When the final confirmation appeared on the screen, I paused. Should I leave her something? No. She had made it clear where her priorities lay. I left just enough to keep the account open, a cruel reminder of what she'd lost. The next call was to my lawyer, Clara. She answered on the second ring. "James, what's going on?" she asked, sounding concerned. "I need divorce papers," I said without hesitation. There was a beat of silence. "James, are you sure? This is a big step." "I'm sure. I want it done fast. I'll pick them up today if you can make it happen." "I'll prioritize it," she said. "But do you want to talk about what's happening first?" "Not right now," I replied. "Just get it done." By mid-afternoon, the house was quiet again. I walked from room to room, taking mental snapshots of everything. The living room where we'd celebrated birthdays. The kitchen where Harper used to hum while cooking. The hallway where Nina and Kyle's height measurements were marked on the wall. I stopped in front of the kids' height chart and ran my fingers over the pencil marks. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't abandoning these memories. I was taking the kids and building new ones elsewhere. The divorce papers were ready by the evening. Clara handed them to me in a thick envelope, her expression unreadable. "James, I've seen a lot of people go through this," she said. "It's never easy. Are you absolutely sure you want to go this route?" "Yes," I said simply. "Then make sure you leave no loose ends," she said. Her words stuck with me as I drove home. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the weight of what I was doing finally settled in. I wasn't just leaving Harper. I was dismantling the life we'd built together. But there was no other choice. In the kitchen, I placed the divorce papers neatly on the counter, weighing them down with a pen. Then, I wrote a note on a piece of paper, keeping it short and to the point. "You made your choice. Now, I'm making mine. Don't look for me or the kids. You don't deserve us." I read it over once, then set it beside the papers. That night, I packed what I could. I filled suitcases with clothes for the kids, important documents, and anything sentimental. Everything else, the furniture, the appliances, the decor, I left behind. It would be sold with the house. I worked quietly, making multiple trips to the car in the driveway. By midnight, everything was packed. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, staring at the house. "Goodbye," I muttered. Then I got out, locked the door, and went back inside for one last check. In the kids' rooms, I left everything untouched for now. I'd wake them early, explain just enough to get them moving, and keep the details for later. Finally, I walked into the bedroom. Harper's side of the bed was untouched from the night before. I stood there for a moment, then pulled out the wedding photo I'd smashed earlier. I gathered the broken pieces of glass, tossed them into the trash, and left the frame face down on the dresser. As I left the room, I turned off the lights. The darkness felt fitting. The morning sun filtered through the blinds as I shook Nina and Kyle awake. Nina groaned, pulling the blanket over her head. "Dad, it's too early," she mumbled. "Come on, kiddo," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "We're going on an adventure." That got her attention. She peeked out from under the blanket, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of adventure? Now? Why so early?" "The fun kind," I said, forcing a smile. "But we have to leave now to make it exciting." Kyle was easier to wake. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, still clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Are we going to the zoo?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "Not exactly," I replied, ruffling his hair. "But you'll like it, I promise. Now grab some clothes and your favorite toys. We're packing light." They didn't argue much after that, though I could tell Nina had questions. She lingered by her closet, glancing at me every so often. I knew she could sense something was off, but I didn't have the strength to explain, not yet. By 9 a.m., we had packed everything we needed. Suitcases lined the hallway, filled with clothes, important documents, and a few sentimental items. Nina insisted on bringing her sketchbook, and Kyle refused to leave without his dinosaur and a stack of Lego bricks. As we loaded the car, Nina finally broke her silence. "Dad," she said, her voice hesitant. "Where's Mom?" I froze for a moment, my hand gripping the handle of the suitcase. Turning to face her, I knelt down so we were at eye level. "Mom's not coming with us right now," I said carefully. Her brow furrowed. "Why not? Did you guys have a fight?" I sighed, trying to find the right words. Sometimes grown-ups need to take a break from each other. "But don't worry, sophomore. You and Kyle are my top priority. I'll always take care of you." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly. I could see the worry in her eyes, but I didn't have the heart to tell her the full truth yet. Kyle, on the other hand, was too preoccupied with buckling his dinosaur into the back seat to notice anything unusual. By noon, we were on the road. The kid sat quietly in the back, Kyle playing with his toys while Nina stared out the window, her sketchbook untouched on her lap. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting Harper's car to appear behind us, but the road was empty. We drove in silence for a while before Nina finally spoke again. "Where are we going, Dad?" "To a new city," I replied. "A fresh start." "Why do we need a fresh start?" she pressed. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "It's complicated, sophomore. I'll explain everything soon, okay?" She didn't look satisfied, but she didn't push further. Meanwhile, back at the house, Harper returned to an eerie silence. The driveway was empty, the curtains drawn. At first, she thought we were out running errands. But as she stepped inside, the emptiness hit her like a wave. The living room was stripped of its usual warmth. The family photos were gone, replaced by blank walls. She called out, "James? Kids?" But the only response was the echo of her own voice. Her confusion turned to panic as she moved through the house. The kids' rooms were empty, their closets cleared out. Her breath quickened as she ran into the kitchen and saw the divorce papers on the counter, along with the note I had left. "You made your choice. Now, I'm making mine. Don't look for me or the kids. You don't deserve us." She stared at the note, her hands trembling. "What the hell is this?" she muttered, her voice cracking. Reaching for her phone, she dialed my number. It went straight to voicemail. "James, what is this? Where are you? Where are the kids? Call me back now," she demanded, her voice laced with a mix of anger and desperation. I ignored the buzzing of my phone as we stopped at a gas station. While the kids stretched their legs, I checked the voicemails piling up. Harper's tone shifted with each one. The first was angry. "What kind of stunt is this, James? You think you could just take the kids and leave? Call me back right now." The second was softer, almost pleading. "James, please. Let's talk about this. Don't do something you'll regret. By the third, her voice was breaking. James, I'm sorry, okay? I messed up. Please, just call me. I need to see the kids. I need to talk to you. I deleted all of them without replying. We reached the new city by late afternoon. The rental house I had arranged was modest but comfortable, nestled in a quiet neighborhood far from Harper's reach. As we pulled into the driveway, Kyle perked up. Is this our new house, Dad? He asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. For now, I said, forcing a smile. What do you think? It's cool, he exclaimed, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Nina, however, was more reserved. She stepped out of the car slowly, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. It's different, she said quietly. Different can be good, I replied. Give it a chance. Inside, the house was sparsely furnished, but it had everything we needed. I showed the kids their rooms, letting them choose where they wanted to sleep. Kyle immediately claimed the room with the biggest window, while Nina lingered in the hallway. Dad, she said after a while, does this mean we're not going back? I hesitated before answering. For now, this is home. But I promise you, Saf, everything I'm doing is for you and Kyle. You'll understand someday. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The weight of the day finally caught up to me. I thought about Harper, about the life we'd built, the family we'd raised together. It wasn't easy to walk away, but her betrayal left me no choice. My phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. Another voicemail from Harper. James, please. I'm begging you. Don't shut me out like this. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can fix us. Just come home. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered her words, her smirk as she walked out the door, and the guilt was replaced by resolve. I turned off the phone and stared out the window at the quiet street. The life Harper had destroyed was behind me now. I had my kids, and that was enough. Tomorrow, we'd start fresh. Harper could keep her regrets. I was done looking back. That Harper's downfall began the moment she stepped back into the empty house. The silence was deafening, and the sight of the divorce papers on the kitchen counter sent a chill through her. She had expected a fight, some shouting, maybe even a heated argument. What she didn't expect was my total absence, along with Nina, Kyle, and every trace of our life together. She grabbed the papers and stared at the note I had left. The words, "You don't deserve us," echoed in her mind. Anger bubbled up inside her, but beneath it was a flicker of panic. She immediately called her boss, her lover, Esteban. Esteban, I need you, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Harper, what's going on? He asked, sounding distracted. James left. He took the kids, emptied the bank account, and disappeared. There was a pause on the other end. What do you mean he disappeared? Didn't you just leave him last night? Harper clenched her fists. Yes, but I didn't think he'd do this. He sold the house, Esteban. The house is practically empty. Esteban sighed. All right, calm down. Come over, and we'll figure this out. At Esteban's luxurious apartment later that evening, Harper vented her frustrations. She paced the living room, clutching a glass of wine, while Esteban sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I can't believe he'd do this to me, she said, her voice trembling. 16 years of marriage, and he just walks away? Takes everything? The kids, the money, everything. Esteban looked up, raising an eyebrow. Can you blame him? You did tell him you were going on a date with me. It wasn't exactly subtle. Harper shot him a glare. Don't act like you're innocent in all this. You encouraged me to leave him. Encouraged you? Harper, you were already halfway out the door. I just made it easier, he replied, taking a sip of his drink. The tension in the room was palpable. This wasn't the same man who had charmed her over candlelit dinners and whispered sweet nothings in her ear. Over the next few days, Harper tried to pick up the pieces of her life. She attempted to contact me again, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Each one became more frantic than the last. James, please let me talk to the kids. I'm their mother. James, we can work this out. Don't punish me like this. James, I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. Just tell me where you are. But her calls went unanswered. She visited our bank, hoping to salvage something, but the sight of the nearly empty joint account left her furious. She slammed her fist on the counter, startling the teller. Where did the money go? she demanded. The teller, unfazed, replied calmly. The account holder transferred the funds. I can't disclose further details. Harper stormed out of the bank, her mind racing. At work, things weren't much better. The affair that had once felt thrilling now seemed like a mistake. Esteban grew distant, his once charming demeanor replaced by indifference. Esteban, we need to talk, Harper said one evening after work. He didn't even look up from his laptop. What now? I need your help. I'm running out of options. James took everything, and I have no one else to turn to. Esteban closed his laptop with a sigh. Harper, I told you I'd help where I can, but this is becoming too much. I didn't sign up to play rescue mission. Her face fell. You said you cared about me. You said you'd support me. I cared about you when it was fun. But now, all you do is complain about your ex and your problems. It's exhausting. The words stung, but Harper tried to keep her composure. You're unbelievable, she snapped. And you're a mess, he shot back. Maybe if you focused on fixing your life instead of blaming everyone else, you wouldn't be in this position. That was the beginning of the end for them. One night, after yet another argument with Esteban, Harper decided to track me down. She showed up unannounced at my parents' house, her hair disheveled and her eyes bloodshot. My mother opened the door, her expression immediately hardening. What do you want, Harper? She asked coldly. Please, I just want to know where James took the kids, Harper pleaded. They're my children too. My mother stepped outside, closing the door behind her. Your children? Is that what you're calling them now? Funny how you didn't seem to care about them when you were off with your boss. I made a mistake, Harper admitted, her voice cracking. But I need to see them. Please, just tell me where they are. My mother crossed her arms. James made it clear he didn't want you in their lives. And after what you did, I don't blame him. You don't understand. Harper cried. Oh, I understand perfectly, my mother said, her voice firm. You threw away a good man and a loving family for some fling. Now you're reaping what you sowed. Don't come back here. With that, she turned and went back inside, slamming the door in Harper's face. Harper returned to Esteban's apartment, defeated. But things there had only gotten worse. Esteban's patience had run out, and he wasn't interested in playing the role of savior anymore. Harper, I think you should leave, he said one evening as she walked through the door. She stared at him, stunned. What? You're kicking me out? Look, this whatever we had, it's not working, he said, avoiding her gaze. You're bringing too much baggage into my life, and I can't deal with it anymore. I gave up everything for you, she shouted. Esteban laughed bitterly. No, Harper. You gave up everything for yourself. Don't pin this on me. Her face twisted with anger and disbelief. You're just like James, she spat. If that's how you see it, fine, he replied, opening the door. But you need to go. Tonight. By the time Harper left, she had nowhere to turn. Her affair had cost her everything. Her marriage, her family, her home, and now her job, as Esteban made sure she was let go from the company shortly after their breakup. She spent the next few weeks crashing on friends' couches, but even they grew tired of her constant complaining and erratic behavior. Eventually, she found herself in a small, dingy apartment, far removed from the comfortable life she had once taken for granted. Every night, she stared at her phone, hoping for a message or call from me. None came. Her new reality was a harsh one. The glamorous dinners and romantic gestures she had once traded her family for were gone, replaced by loneliness and regret. The life she had destroyed wasn't coming back, and she had no one to blame but herself. The first morning in our new house was a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The rental was small but cozy, with just enough space for the three of us. Nina sat on the couch, hugging her knees, while Kyle stared at the boxes we hadn't unpacked yet. Are we staying here forever, Dad? Kyle asked, his voice small. I crouched next to him, ruffling his hair. Maybe not forever, buddy, but for a while. It's our home now, okay? He nodded, though his eyes betrayed his unease. Nina, on the other hand, stayed quiet, her gaze fixed on the floor. What about Mom? She finally asked, breaking the silence. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had dreaded, but knew I couldn't avoid. Mom made a mistake, I said gently. She hurt our family, and she needs time to figure things out. But I promise you, we're going to be okay. We have each other, and that's what matters. Nina looked at me with a mix of sadness and confusion. Will we ever see her again? I don't know, I admitted honestly. But right now, we need to focus on us. On starting fresh. She nodded slowly, though I could see the questions lingering in her eyes. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments. I enrolled the kids in school and found a job working as a project manager at a local firm. The hours were long, and juggling work with parenting was a challenge, but every step felt like progress. Nina struggled the most. She had always been close to her mother, and the abrupt change left her feeling lost. One evening, I found her in her room, clutching a framed photo of the four of us from a family vacation years ago. I miss her, she whispered. I sat down beside her, putting my arm around her shoulders. I know, sweetheart. It's okay to miss her. She's still your mom, and that won't ever change. Did she really leave us for someone else? Nina's voice cracked, and tears welled up in her eyes. I hesitated, trying to find the right words. She made some bad choices, Nina. Choices that hurt our family. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you and Kyle. She didn't say anything, just leaned into me and cried. I held her, silently vowing to do whatever it took to help her heal. Kyle, being younger, adapted more quickly. He was excited about his new school and made friends easily. But even he had moments when the reality of our situation hit him. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. Dad, do you think Mom misses us? I smiled softly, brushing his hair back. I'm sure she does, Kyle. She loves you and Nina very much. Then why doesn't she call? The question cut deep, but I kept my expression calm. Sometimes grown-ups don't know how to fix things when they mess up. But that doesn't mean she doesn't care about you. He nodded, seeming to accept my answer, and soon drifted off to sleep. Despite the challenges, we began to find our rhythm. Mornings were chaotic but full of life, packing lunches, rushing to school drop-offs, and trying to beat the clock to get to work on time. Evenings were our time to come together, sharing stories from the day over dinner, and playing board games in the living room. One Friday night, as we were playing Monopoly, Nina laughed for the first time in weeks. Dad, you're terrible at this game, she teased as I landed on her hotel property for the third time. Hey, I'm just giving you a head start, I replied with a grin, handing over my last $500. Kyle cheered. I'm winning. Nina's going down next. The sound of their laughter filled the room, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were going to be okay. The weekends became our escape from the stress of rebuilding. I made it a point to take the kids out, hiking, visiting local parks, or just going for ice cream. One Saturday, we stumbled upon a small community fair. Can we go on the Ferris wheel? Kyle begged, pulling on my sleeve. Sure, why not? I said, and soon the three of us were at the top looking out over the city. This is nice, Nina said softly, leaning her head against my shoulder. It is, I agreed, wrapping my arm around her. In those moments, I realized that while our family had changed, it wasn't broken. We were still a team. The hardest part of starting over was facing my own emotions. Late at night, after the kids were asleep, I would sit alone, grappling with the pain of Harper's betrayal. Memories of our life together would flood back. The good times, the promises we made, the plans for the future. One night, as I sifted through an old box of photos, I found a letter Harper had written me on our 10th anniversary. James, you are my rock, my partner, my everything. I can't imagine life without you. The words felt like a cruel joke now, a reminder of how much things had changed. But instead of dwelling on the hurt, I folded the letter and put it back in the box. She made her choice, I whispered to myself. And now I'm making mine. Over time, I began to rebuild not just my life, but also my sense of self. For years, I had defined myself as Harper's husband, the provider, the steady presence in our family. Now I was learning to be something more, a single father, a man starting fresh, someone who deserved happiness. At work, I threw myself into my projects, earning the respect of my colleagues and finding fulfillment in my accomplishments. Outside of work, I connected with other single parents in the community, forming a support network that reminded me I wasn't alone. One evening, after a school event for Kyle, I struck up a conversation with another parent, a woman named Rachel. Your son did great in the play, she said, smiling. Thanks. He's been practicing his lines for weeks, I replied. We talked for a while, sharing stories about our kids and the challenges of parenting. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something, hope, maybe even the beginnings of a connection. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Each day brought new challenges, but also new victories. The kids were thriving, I was finding my footing, and together we were creating a new version of happiness. As I tucked Nina and Kyle into bed one night, Nina looked up at me and said, "I'm glad we're here, Dad. I think this is a good place for us." "Me too, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead. And as I turned off the lights and closed their door, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. We were rebuilding one day at a time, and for the first time, I truly believed we were going to be okay. It had been almost 8 months since Harper walked out that door, laughing at my ultimatum. 8 months since I had packed up our lives and left her behind. Life had finally settled into a fragile normalcy for me and the kids. Then, on an unassuming Saturday afternoon, everything changed. The doorbell rang while I was folding laundry in the living room. Kyle and Nina were upstairs, bickering about something trivial. I didn't expect anyone, so I opened the door cautiously. There she was, Harper. She looked nothing like the confident, smirking woman who had once stood in our bedroom, brushing off 16 years of marriage like they were a joke. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her clothes looked as though they had been pulled out of a laundry pile in desperation. But it was her eyes that struck me the most, red, swollen, and hollow, like she hadn't slept in days. "James," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't respond immediately. I stood there, gripping the edge of the door as a cold wave of emotions hit me, anger, pain, and surprisingly, a small flicker of pity. "What do you want?" I asked, my tone clipped. She stepped forward, but I didn't move. The unspoken barrier between us was clear. "Please," she said, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her face. "I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "About what?" "How great your life is now. How your boss-turned-lover dumped you." She winced, visibly recoiling at my words. "I deserve that," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You deserve a lot more," I shot back. Her composure shattered. She sobbed, clutching the doorframe for support. "James, I made a mistake. A horrible, selfish mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. I threw everything away for something meaningless. Please, I just want a chance to fix this." I stared at her, incredulous. "Fix this? How, Harper? You destroyed our family. You betrayed me. You abandoned the kids. And now you think you can just show up here, crying, and make it all go away." "I know I can't undo what I did," she pleaded. "But I'll do anything to make it right. I miss you, James. I miss the kids. I can't live like this anymore." Her words ignited the anger I had tried so hard to bury. I took a step forward, my voice hard and unyielding. "You can't live like this? Really? You mean living with the consequences of your choices? Do you have any idea what you put us through?" The nights Nina cried herself to sleep, wondering why her mom didn't care enough to stay. The questions Kyle asked about why you don't call. I had to rebuild their trust and their sense of safety, something you shattered. Harper dropped to her knees, clutching at her chest as if my words were physical blows. "I know I hurt them. I know I hurt you. But I was stupid, James. I thought I wanted something more, but I was wrong. None of it mattered. None of it compares to what we had." "Had," I repeated bitterly. "Past tense, Harper. What we had is gone. And that's on you." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Please, James. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just give me a chance. For the kids, if nothing else." I shook my head, my heart hardening against her desperation. "The kids? Now you care about the kids? Where was this concern when you walked out that door for your wild night?" "They deserve better, Harper. I deserved better." Her sobs intensified, and for a moment, I hesitated. Not because I believed her words, but because the woman in front of me was a broken shell of the person I once loved. But pity wasn't enough. Not for what she had done. "Harper," I said, my voice quieter but no less firm, "it's too late. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Her eyes widened, and she grabbed my hand desperately. Please, James. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just don't shut me out like this. I pulled my hand away, stepping back into the house. This isn't about shutting you out. It's about protecting myself and the kids. We've started to heal, Harper. Bringing you back into our lives would only reopen wounds that are finally beginning to close. She stayed on her knees, her sobs echoing in the quiet street. James, she whimpered one last time, her voice barely audible. I hesitated, my hand on the door. For a brief moment, I considered letting her in, letting her explain herself more. But then I thought of Nina and Kyle upstairs, their lives finally finding stability. I thought of the nights I spent picking up the pieces of our broken family while she was off chasing a fantasy. Without another word, I closed the door. Inside, I leaned against the door, my heart pounding. I could still hear her muffled sobs outside, but I didn't move. A few minutes later, Nina came downstairs, rubbing her eyes. Dad? Who was at the door? I forced a small smile. No one important, sweetheart. Go back to bed. She frowned, glancing toward the door. Is Mom coming back? Her question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. No, I said softly but firmly. Mom's not coming back. Nina nodded, her expression unreadable, and returned upstairs. I stood there for a long time, listening as Harper's sobs faded into the night. The next day, I found an envelope on the porch. It was a handwritten letter from Harper, begging for forgiveness, filled with promises to change and apologies for the pain she had caused. I read it once, then placed it in the same box where I kept old photos and mementos of our life together. It wasn't anger or hatred that made me walk away from Harper that day. It was the understanding that some wounds don't heal, and some bridges can't be rebuilt. For the sake of my children and myself, I had to let her go. The first time I met Viviana, I wasn't looking for love. I was at the grocery store with Nina and Kyle, trying to navigate the chaos of raising two kids on my own. Nina was negotiating for snacks that weren't on the shopping list, and Kyle was poking holes in the bread bags for reasons only a 9-year-old would understand. Need a hand? A soft voice asked from behind me. I turned to see a woman holding a bag of apples and smiling warmly. She had kind brown eyes and an easy, natural presence that immediately set me at ease. I think I've got it, I replied, though the frazzled state of my cart and kids suggested otherwise. She laughed and handed Kyle a shiny green apple to distract him. I'm Viviana, she said. Sometimes all it takes is a snack bribe to stop them from tearing the store apart. I chuckled despite myself. James! And these two troublemakers are Nina and Kyle. Nice to meet you, Nina and Kyle, Viviana said, crouching to their level. Nina blushed and said a shy hello, while Kyle, his mouth full of apple, gave an enthusiastic thumbs up. That brief encounter led to a coffee date a week later. I was hesitant at first, unsure if I was ready to let someone new into our lives. But Viviana was patient. She didn't push, didn't pry, and didn't flinch when I cautiously explained my situation with Harper. I'm not here to fix anything, she said simply. I just want to get to know you and your kids. The rest will fall into place if it's meant to, and it did. Months passed, and Viviana became a constant presence in our lives. She had a way of connecting with Nina and Kyle that felt effortless. She listened to their stories, helped with homework, and even attended Kyle's school play, cheering louder than anyone else in the audience. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the kids play in the yard, I turned to her and said, I don't think I've ever met anyone like you. She raised an eyebrow, her smile teasing. Is that a compliment, or are you about to tell me I'm weird? I laughed. It's definitely a compliment. You've brought something into our lives that I didn't think was possible after everything. Viviana reached over and took my hand. You and the kids deserve happiness, James. I'm just glad I get to be part of it. Meanwhile, Harper's life continued its downward spiral. She was working a minimum wage job at a retail store, living in a cramped studio apartment on the outskirts of town. The glamour she had once chased with her boss was long gone. He had moved on to someone younger and more ambitious, leaving Harper to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Occasionally, she would send emails or letters, pleading for another chance. The words were always the same: apologies, promises, and desperate declarations of love. I never responded, not out of spite, but because I knew nothing she said could undo the damage she had caused. One day, Nina found one of Harper's letters in the mail. She brought it to me, her expression unreadable. "Are you going to talk to her?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. I think it's best we leave things as they are." Nina hesitated, then nodded. "She hurt us, Dad. She hurt you. I don't want her to come back and ruin everything again." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Nina was only 13, but she carried the wisdom of someone far older. "You're right," I said softly. "We've come too far to let the past pull us back." The turning point in my relationship with Viviana came on Kyle's 10th birthday. We had planned a small party in the backyard, just family and a few friends from school. Viviana showed up early to help with decorations, and Nina insisted she sit with us when we sang Happy Birthday. As Kyle blew out the candles, he looked at Viviana and said, "I'm glad you're here. You make things feel like home." Viviana's eyes glistened with tears, and she smiled at him. "Thank you, Kyle. That means more to me than you know." Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I found Viviana in the kitchen washing dishes. "You're amazing, you know that?" I said, leaning against the counter. She turned to me, water dripping from her hands. "I'm just me, James. I'm not trying to be amazing." "Well, you are," I insisted. "And I think I'm falling in love with you." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I worried I had said too much too soon. But then she smiled, drying her hands on a towel. "Good," she said, stepping closer, "because I've been falling for you too." Harper, meanwhile, had heard through mutual acquaintances about my new relationship. It didn't take long for her to find Viviana's social media profile. She sent me a message late one night. "I hope she knows she'll never replace me." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing a response. "She's not replacing you, Harper. She's filling the void you left when you walked out. And she's doing a damn good job of it." I hit send and blocked her number. Viviana and I continued to build our life together. We took trips to the beach, attended Nina's dance recitals, and even adopted a dog named Charlie. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. One evening, as we sat by the fire pit in the backyard, I turned to Viviana and said, "Thank you for everything. For being here, for loving the kids, for loving me." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You don't have to thank me, James. This is where I'm meant to be." As the flames crackled and the kids laughed inside, I realized that for all the pain and betrayal Harper had caused, she had also set me on a path to something better. Viviana wasn't just a new beginning. She was a reminder that even in the aftermath of heartbreak, happiness was still possible. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slip away. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Nina approached me. The sun streamed through the living room windows as I sat on the couch, reading the news on my tablet. She stood in front of me, clutching one of her notebooks, her brows furrowed in thought. "Dad, can I ask you something?" she said hesitantly, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. I set the tablet down and patted the seat beside me. "Of course, sophomore. What's on your mind?" She sat down, her fingers nervously tracing the edges of her notebook. "Do you think Mom regrets what she did?" The question caught me off guard, but I kept my face neutral. Nina rarely brought up her mother these days. It had been months since Harper had made contact, and the kids had seemed to move on, adjusting to our new life. But I could see the curiosity in Nina's eyes, the need for an honest answer. I leaned back, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. "I think she does, sweetheart," I began, choosing my words carefully. "But sometimes, when you make the wrong choice, you have to live with the consequences. That's life." Nina nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "Do you think she misses us?" "I'm sure she does," I said gently. "But missing someone and being able to fix what's broken are two very different things." She was quiet for a while, her fingers still tracing the notebook's edges. Then she looked at me, her eyes shining with a mix of sadness and determination. "I don't hate her, you know. I'm just disappointed. She broke something that didn't need to be broken." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I know, Soph," I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And it's okay to feel that way. What matters is that you and Kyle are happy now. That's all I've ever wanted." Later that evening, I sat on the porch with Viviana. sharing a cup of tea as the kids played with Charlie in the yard. Nina's question lingered in my mind, pulling me back to memories I'd rather forget. "You look like you're somewhere else," Viviana said, her voice breaking through my thoughts. I sighed and rubbed the back of my neck. Nina asked me if I thought Harper regrets what she did. Viviana set her cup down, her expression thoughtful. "And what did you tell her?" "That I think she does. But I also told her that some choices have consequences you can't undo." Viviana nodded, her gaze fixed on the kids. "That's true. But it's also true that your kids are lucky to have you. You've been their rock through all of this." I smiled faintly, watching Kyle chase Charlie across the yard. "I just want them to know that no matter what happens, they're loved. Even if Harper couldn't be the mother they deserved, they still have me. And now they have you." She reached over and took my hand. "We're building something good here, James. Don't let the past cast a shadow over it." That night, as I tucked Kyle into bed, he looked up at me with wide, sleepy eyes. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever come back?" The question wasn't as unexpected as Nina's earlier one, but it still stung. "I don't think so, buddy," I said honestly. "But you know what? We're doing just fine, aren't we?" He nodded, his small hand clutching the edge of his blanket. "Yeah, I like it here, and I like Viviana. She's nice." "She is nice," I agreed, ruffling his hair. "And she cares about you and Nina very much." Kyle yawned and snuggled deeper into his blanket. "I'm glad she's here," he murmured before drifting off to sleep. I stood there for a moment, watching him breathe softly, and felt a surge of gratitude. Despite everything, my kids were thriving. A week later, Harper sent another email. It was short, just a few lines. "James, I know I've lost everything, but I want you to know how sorry I am. Please let me see the kids. I'll do anything to make things right." I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her she had no right to ask for anything after the pain she'd caused. But another part of me, the part that remembered the woman I had loved for 16 years, felt a twinge of pity. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted the email and blocked her address. Harper had made her choices, and it was time for her to live with them. Months turned into a year, and our lives continued to flourish. Nina excelled in her art classes, and Kyle joined a local soccer team. Viviana became an even more integral part of our family, helping with school projects, attending parent-teacher conferences, and planning weekend outings. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Nina asked, "Do you think we'll ever see Mom again?" The question hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. I looked at Viviana, who gave me a small nod, encouraging me to be honest. "I don't know, Saf," I admitted. "But what I do know is that we're happy now. And sometimes that's enough." She seemed to accept that, turning her attention back to her plate. A few weeks later, I ran into an old acquaintance at the grocery store. He mentioned seeing Harper working at a diner in town. "She looked rough," he said, shaking his head. "Didn't even recognize her at first." I thanked him for the information and walked away, my emotions a mix of sadness and vindication. Harper had once laughed in my face, confident that she could have it all. Now, she was a shadow of her former self, a living reminder of the consequences of her choices. That night, as I sat on the porch with Viviana, I shared the news. "She's paying the price," I said, staring out at the yard. Viviana placed a hand on my arm. "And you? Do you feel any better knowing that?" I thought about it for a moment. "I don't know. I don't wish her harm, but I can't forget what she did. I think it's enough that the kids and I are okay now." She smiled softly. "That's what matters, James. Focus on what you're building, not what you've left behind." And she was right. Harper had made her choices, and I had made mine. In the end, the ultimate lesson wasn't just about betrayal and consequences. It was about resilience, love, and the strength to start over. As I sat there with Viviana, listening to the laughter of my children in the background, I realized we had built something beautiful out of the ruins of betrayal. Harper had become a cautionary tale. But for me, she was also a reminder that sometimes the hardest endings lead to the best beginnings.